Okay, I am so excited for today's guest. We have Dr. Shamtobi with us. She's an incredible licensed clinical psychologist and a dear friend of mine. So I'm so happy you're here. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this since we first spoke about it. It's exciting to be here.
So excited. So Dr. Shamtobi has a practice in Santa Monica and her clients rave about her. She's just a phenomenal therapist. So I'm really excited to dive into our topic today. And Dr. Shamtobi specializes in a few things, including anxiety and life stage transitions. So I know you work with a few clients who are single and who deal with anxiety and certain things that come up when they are single.
I mean, I don't think this topic has ever been more prevalent in my practice since COVID began, because a lot of people were dealing with being single, not even by choice anymore, but by circumstance. So even those of us who were eager to date and get out there didn't have that option, at least in the traditional ways that were available to us before. So definitely something that's been coming up a lot.
Yeah, more relevant than ever
Yeah, I
for
think
so
so.
many people, because like you're saying, dating's hard as it is, and with the pandemic a lot of people were forced in this like period of self-reflection and not being able to date and access relationships like before.
Absolutely. And I mean, we could have this conversation about any stage of attachment with a partner, whether it was being single, being early in a relationship, finally having to confront the fact that you don't like the partner that you're living with.
Yeah.
I know several people, including myself, who got married during the pandemic and all the unique challenges that came with that. But I think particularly the idea of isolation that so many people felt who were dealing with this as single individuals, it really brought a focus to that. And I'm actually really excited and eager to be talking about it because, we want to bring some psychological tips and tricks to how to manage those negative feelings that arise when we become maybe too aware of how single we are.
Yeah. So if for whoever's listening, if you're single or if you have any friends who are single, this is going to be a great episode for you. And feel free to share this with everyone because hopefully it will be very helpful.
Yeah.
So to get started, I would love to talk about how we can help single people just reframe the experience of being single. So I think there's a ton of messages from culture, from family, from friends. I hear just so many friends of mine who are just bombarded with messages on how they should feel and feel bad when they're single. So I was just curious if you have any ideas on how single people can reframe this idea that can be stressful.
I mean, totally. As if our own self-talk about being single weren't bad enough,
Mhm.
left to ourselves and our own thoughts about it, we have all the external messages about what it means. And I mean, I will say, I think the tide is turning towards being more empowered as someone who's not in a relationship, or even how to redefine what being in a relationship looks like to suit our needs. But go with like the more traditional idea of singleness
Mhm.
and add the layer of what cultural background do you come from? How stigmatized is it to be, or stigmatizing is it to be 30 years old and not have had children yet? So we're not just dealing with reframing our own needs as people who want to potentially be partnered, but the reminders from our society that like, hey, how you are isn't right. One of the major reframes, and I actually want to refer to one of your previous podcasts about the concept of noticing.
Mm.
So, where that really comes into play with negative self talk is that this chatter in our head is often going unnoticed throughout our day. And without even realizing it, we're being very mean, if not cruel to ourselves because of a million different reasons, but we're not noticing it. And so, how do we stop negative self talk if we don't even realize that we're engaging in negative self talk? So what I would encourage is for your listeners to just pause for a second, listen to that episode just to see how you can first check in with yourself. And I would even say, I tell my clients all the time to set random timers throughout the day, obviously not during your work meetings, like at 1:54 p.m. or 8, I don't know, 37, and have that alarm remind you to listen to what your brain is telling yourself in that moment. Just catch it. And if you realize that you're spending too much time swiping on the apps, or that you haven't gotten off the couch because there's nothing to do and no one to hang out with, that would be an opportunity to reframe what's going on. A lot of times our thoughts are, I'm lonely. What's wrong with me that everybody in my friend group is married or has a partner and I'm the only single one? Or I try so hard. I've been to therapy. I've done all the things my therapist is telling me to do. Why isn't this working? I mean, what kind of consequence does that have on your self-esteem? Versus telling yourself, I'm feeling very alone right now. What might I be able to engage in to feel 5% less alone?
Yes.
You know, it's the minor reframes that often are what are the most realistic for us to achieve. So I'm not ever going to sit here and tell yourself to be like, I'm not lonely. I'm doing great. I exist, on social network and there are a million people loving me and that blah, blah. I think that that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
But just telling yourself, is there a friend that I can reach out to right now and say, I'm having a rough night. Like, tell me you love me, like that type of thing. It's just a call to action in a different way.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah. I always say we can't change something we're not aware of.
Right.
I think so many people try to change their anxiety or they want to feel better instantly.
Yeah.
Without noticing that their heart rate is through the roof, that the narrative that they're telling themselves is terrible and so mean.
And
So
highly activating. Yeah.
and highly activating. Yes. And a lot of this programming, I think people forget it goes on automatically and we don't always know that it's happening. So it's not always a conscious thing. So I love that tip of setting a reminder just to be intentional because our day can go by so quickly without even noticing.
Just to add to what you were just saying, like what also happens is when we're telling ourselves, I'm so lonely because I'm single, we're making this causal connection and saying that loneliness is only an emotion that single people feel. Or when I'm not single anymore, I'm not going to feel lonely again. And that is not the case. I feel lonely throughout the day. I feel lonely sometimes when I'm sitting on the couch with my partner. Loneliness is an emotion. And as humans, you have access to a whole spectrum of emotions. It's when you make that emotion wrong that it becomes problematic.
Ooh,
right?
So good. Yes.
And so I guarantee you'll have to work on feelings of loneliness throughout your lifetime, throughout any stage of life that you're in. But if you can identify, I really wish someone were here to hold me. That's different than I'm lonely. That's identifying a need. I really need to be held. And I'm sad that no one is here to hold me. And I'm allowed to have some grief around that. And maybe that means I need to hug myself. Maybe that means I need to buy a body pillow and just let myself give into feeling like there's someone in bed with me. Like, let's not be ashamed of the ways that we need to care for ourselves surrounding those feelings.
And you touch on something so important, which I think is one of your greatest strengths as a therapist. It's that not waiting until X, Y, and Z to feel better, to feel complete, to feel loved, to feel whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
You can find it now. But I think especially for singleness, it's really tough because obviously you can't do certain things. You can't be cuddled on the couch like you were saying. So yeah, that's just such a good point that you made.
And it's tough because there are certain things that, again, if we're talking about a more traditional timeline, and for women, because a lot of my practice is comprised of women, if you want to have a child and you want to have a child within marriage, having a partner to pursue that with is part of the formula. And so I can't tell you to do anything to supplement getting a child. There is no supplement for that. But again, allowing yourself to be sad about the thing you're sad about versus about who you are, what you've done wrong, that you're bad because you don't have it. At least you're grieving the right thing. At least you're sad about the emotion that's causing you pain, not saying like this thing about me will never allow me to have a partner, because that's simply not true. And if you want, I can elaborate on this concept of not waiting to be in a partnership in order to pursue change and growth in your life, because I know that you highlighted that.
Yeah, it's such an important topic. I'd love for you to share a little bit more.
Yeah. So I recently was speaking to somebody who was sharing how they've learned a lot about themselves and they can't wait till they're in a relationship in order to try out these new skills, in order to like test themselves, see how much they've grown. And as this person was talking, all I kept thinking was like, why are we waiting until your next relationship? Like, these are all skills that humans need to develop, humans have for any kind of situation. And one of the things that I really want to stress is that we can broaden the horizons of how we practice our skill sets. So just because you learn something in a romantic relationship doesn't mean that that's the only place that skill can grow. So as you're waiting for your next relationship, see how you can apply more direct communication at work. See how you can be more vulnerable with your friends. See if you're struggling with commitment issues. Can you commit to journaling for 5 minutes a day? We don't always have to be so literal and say, well, I was scared to give this person to be vulnerable with this person. So the next time I'm in a relationship, I'm going to go hard on vulnerability. These are things that you can always be practicing throughout your life if you just remember that they're available to you all the time. So no need to wait to see how you're doing. You can try it any moment, any day.
So important. So if I'm listening correctly, it's almost like your weakness maybe in the past relationships or your most recent relationship, something that you struggled with, or maybe a blind spot that you're excited to get rid of in your new relationship. Start to practice that today, like with people in your life, with people
Absolutely.
around you, just out and about.
And to add to that, in addition to the things that you want to grow on, the things that you loved about yourself in your relationship that maybe you miss about yourself because you don't have that kind of dynamic to do it in. That's still you. That's still available to you. If you loved giving as a partner and you're like, oh, I just want to give my love and my affection and my time to somebody, give it to someone else. Find other ways to offer that. Now you can volunteer again, or you can go on walks with a neighbor. You can go to a shelter and play with puppies. It might not be the same thing, but if we're always looking for a 10 out of 10, we're missing opportunities to have a 7 out of 10. And that's still really good.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Love it. So good. So just transitioning slightly, this podcast, I talk a ton about the nervous system and the body and how to regulate yourself and just be more aware of how your body works.
Mm-hmm.
Something that can be incredibly stressful for, I think, single people across all ages is dating.
Yes.
Going on dates, first dates, just having ever. Yes.
So scary.
So I wanted to touch on this and maybe give the listeners a few ideas on how to regulate the anxiety that comes when you have to show up with someone you don't know yet. And, it's a process. So any ideas or any thoughts on first dates?
Yes. To your point, it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us get in our heads about the fact that like as soon as we walk into that bar or we meet up at the park, that first second is like the whole impression. And we put so much pressure on ourselves that we need to get that moment right or get the first few minutes of the date right, or else it's a total disaster. I really want to stress that the person you're on a first date with is likely as stressed out as you about being there, about making a good impression, about getting you to like them. They're a human being. So bringing them down a notch, which sounds funny because when we're dating, we're like trying to find, this great person, but bring them down a notch. Remember that you're in a room with a human being. And at the same time, remember that you're probably an amazing person and that you have a lot to offer. And if you, like some of my clients are telling me, I'm really shy, I don't have that much to contribute, I'm not a good conversationalist. So, like, this feels like a setup. I don't think I'm that interesting. Then own that about yourself. Own it. Bring it to the table and say, you know what? I'm kind of shy and like first dates can be hard for me. And see how the person across from you manages that. Sometimes externalizing the things that we internalize helps release them out of our body, out of all that pressure that we're putting to keep them hidden, not show the person that we're neurotic or that we're, I don't know, nervous. There's a type of therapy, it's called acceptance commitment therapy. And I'm a big fan of a lot of its interventions because essentially what it's saying is that when you're fighting accepting the truth, so you do not accept the truth, all it does is make the thing you're fighting take up more space in your life. Because how can you change something that you are not willing to look at and accept as taking up space? And so I understand that this might be weird to start off a date by going, hey, I'm pretty shy, but assuming that that person doesn't suck, they might actually help to make you feel better. And if that person sucks, then that's great information for you to know off the bat that maybe they're not compatible with you.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. And I love that, externalizing what we internalize. Because I think we have a fear that we will be judged or something will happen. But it's way more miserable to be a pressure cooker about to explode.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Especially with shyness, it's a personality trait that I'm trying to debunk because I think there's a lot of myths about shy people and that it's all, your upbringing and a choice. But I actually think it has a lot to do with individual wiring and neuro differences. It's really tough. There's a lot of stigma, I think, for shyer, more quiet people. So I love that, really honoring like who you are and how you're wired.
Yes.
It's like when I say that, it's like I take a breath of fresh air. It's like a sigh of relief. It's so important to honor that piece, that you're not always feeling bad for someone not being someone you're not, and really just owning it.
We need people to be different in order to keep things interesting. If we were all the same and showed up the same, either the room would be too quiet or too loud. So we're trying to strike balance here. And, once you're in a relationship, or you can think about other relationships, probably the best parts of it were the ways that you complemented one another, or the ways that you watched a partner take care of your needs that you didn't even know you needed taken care of, but they were able to identify things that you couldn't for you and help you through that. And so I just think it can be a really beautiful thing to take up space, even if that means you don't want to take up that much space, and be honest about that.
So important.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, like, honoring how scary it can be to do that if you don't have a practice of it.
Right.
But this leads me to something else that I think is so important with dating, and that is being your whole true self, showing up as your authentic self from the beginning so that you attract the right person.
100%.
Yeah.
Maybe a mantra that I could offer your audience is, like, when you're in the car, you're about to get out, just to take a second and tell yourself that you deserve to be in the space that you're about to enter into. And just tell yourself, I deserve to be on this date. I deserve to be taking up space on this date. I deserve to be treated well. And a lot of us struggle with the word deserve because maybe it means that we think we're entitled to something. I'd like to flip the script on that word, because there's so many times where we're telling ourselves that we don't need that much. I just want the bare minimum. If only he just like were a little bit nice to me. And then we show up and we're breadcrumbing ourselves. We're basically letting people give us the bare minimum. And if we just say in a kind, loving way to ourselves, you're deserving of going on this date and having a nice night. You're deserving of whatever conversation that you engage in. It can just give you a little bit of pep when you show up, that like you belong there.
Love it. Yeah. And it taps into worthiness. Like you are worthy and deserving of fun and of joy and of just feeling good.
Fun. We forget that dating can be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So to wrap this conversation up, I want to touch briefly on how to regulate yourself before a date. Because anything, date related, but also any events where there's eyes on you, it can be activating to the nervous system. It can cause that fight or flight response, even if it's something you tend to enjoy or logically should be fun or you should enjoy. So I just wanted to talk about a few options and give the listeners a few ideas on how to regulate themselves before a date. And I have mentioned in previous episodes, it really depends on your nervous system. So really getting to know your unique body and what you need when you're stressed and doing that work ahead of time is so important, because for some of us, we need more stillness and to breathe and to slow it down. For others, stillness can be even more activating. So we need to move, to shake, to dance, to call a friend, to do something active to help our stress come down a little bit. So do you have any ideas to add to that?
Well, it's funny you said that, because I remember before I would go on first dates or even second or third dates, like when I still wasn't comfortable, I would dance like with my makeup on and my hair ready. I would just dance to kind of get a flush in my cheeks. So that when I saw the person, I felt sexy because I felt like I was in my body and I had connected with myself in that way. So when I went down, maybe I had like a different kind of glow, or just I was having fun without that person. And it was a reminder that I'm like descending into the date as a whole person. So it really does depend, because I know for some people that's like a big no and sounds like embarrassing to do, but just normalizing it for anybody who does that. There are a few things that I would suggest without judgment, because if you're someone who does this, I have to say, I genuinely understand why you might want to take a shot of tequila before, have a glass of wine, or even maybe take, if you have an anti-anxiety medicine and you feel like it would take the edge off. I genuinely get it. And I also think that it can at times really rob you of learning different ways to soothe yourself and to not tell your nervous system, I need to numb you in order to get through what's about to happen next. And again, I'm not judging, because sometimes we numb and we all do that in different ways. Maybe I numbed by dancing, and we can have that discussion too. But I just think if you can learn different ways to access what your needs are, some people might want to just be on a phone call with a friend on a drive to the date so that they're just, feeling like they're in a state of comfort. Some people will have to take several deep breaths, do a quick meditation, journal out their stress beforehand. I think the only problem to a lot of this is that we don't actually do it. We know that it would help us. We have maybe too many magazines and therapists, extolling the virtues of mindfulness meditation. But the reason that's happening is because it's highly, highly effective. And we just need to give ourselves a chance to develop those habits so that when we really need them,
Mhm.
So like when we're not in a fight or flight state, we need to practice these behaviors so that when we need them, before a first date, we've practiced it already. So don't start deep breathing for the first time before you go on a first date. You'll probably hyperventilate. Do it, now, start today when there's nothing necessarily pushing you along. Learn about yourself at any event that's making you feel uncomfortable, even if your phone rings and you're like, who's that? What do you need in that movement and that moment to soothe yourself?
Yeah.
So I'm just a big believer that every second of your life is an opportunity to learn more about yourself, as long as you're willing to do that kind of check-in, and you could really enjoy yourself. Like, I know it sounds daunting, but it could be fun to be your own friend in that way.
It's so good. Yes. And I heard just so many hidden messages of supporting something I call body wisdom, which
Hmm.
is basically, we have a relationship with our body and our nervous system, and we either choose to listen and to respect it and respond with coping in positive ways, or we don't, or we cut off that communication and cope and kind of numb it. And there's endless empathy for when we do that, because we're human. Like, it's going to happen, but it is a choice. It's like a relationship, and your body wisdom, that relationship between mind and body, it just gets so much stronger when you choose to listen, choose to respond, and just be conscious with how you cope.
You said this before, and I'm now sharing this phrase with my clients, but you said, first the body whispers, then it talks, and then it starts to scream and yell at you.
Mhm.
And I love that idea, because that means there are so many opportunities for us to hear ourselves. And we can listen to whispers if we just sit and try to hear them out. And that's really cool. It gives you so much control once you realize that was a whisper. That's me. That's me telling myself something. And it's really, really exciting. Once you're at a yell, you're just going to take that shot of tequila before the first date. It's too hard not to.
You are
So,
exactly right. Yeah, there's too much adrenaline, cortisol just shooting through the body.
right.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, I have one question for you. I'm putting you on the spot.
Ooh, love that.
So, what would you say is your biggest piece of advice
Mhm.
for people who are just feeling down and struggling with being single?
You have a right to feel that way. You
Mm.
have a right to feel down about it. If it's something you care about and you want and wish for yourself, and you're not getting it, it's okay to feel sad about it. It's okay to cry about it. It's okay to talk to your friends about it. You don't have to deal with it by yourself. We are social human beings. We've evolved in ways that make us want to belong in groups, and we want partnership. And you have every right to be sad and feel whatever grief you feel about that. My piece of advice is, don't be mean to yourself because you're sad about it. Try to navigate the difference between sadness and cruelty when it comes to how you're managing those moments of feeling too connected to your singlehood. You do not deserve the negative messages that are harmful to you when you're in your most vulnerable state. And I will be here to remind you of that. To anybody who needs to hear it on a loop, don't be mean to yourself.
So good. Oh, you're such a bright light. She really will remind you.
I will.
So good at that. Well, thank you so, so much for being here. Please tell the listeners where they can find you and reach out.
You can find me at www.thislife.co. And I'm here in the Los Angeles area. I also do coaching for clients who are outside of California. So I'm licensed in the state of California to do therapy, but for anybody out there who is hearing this all around the world, you can still reach out to me and let's talk.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again. This was so fun.
Thank you for having me.